Hey guys, what's going on? In today's video, I just wanted to add to the dialogue between the libertarian YouTubers and the groyper YouTubers. Particularly Libertas and Jimmy Talks are some significant figures that come to mind because they started this whole drama. Both of them conservative-leaning Gen Z content creators. And so this is the big thing now. This is the big divide on the right. Are we going to be libertarians or are we going to be groypers? And you know, sometimes it's hard for me to tell where the groypers are at. Are they Christian nationalists? Are they white nationalists? Are they communitarians? Are they monarchists? Are they constitutionalists? I really don't know, okay? Because a lot of the groyper stuff is covered in vagaries and irony, so I don't really know where they stand on a lot of stuff. But with that aside, I'm gonna give my thoughts on this matter unprompted because I'm bored today and I need to make a YouTube video for fun. So as a 20-year-old white guy in a blue state who has his foothold in some very liberal left institutions, I'm gonna give my perspective on all of this. Firstly, I just want to say that both libertarianism and groyperism, I guess you could call it now, that's what I'll probably call it for the rest of the video, have some incredibly appealing ideas to me. I want to give some compliments to the groypers first because I feel like I've been harsher on them so far this video. I really like that a main staple of groyperism is being unapologetic in your European heritage and acknowledging that a lot of the nice things in American and more broadly Western culture, and particularly its more civil aspects compared to the rest of the world, were brought about by the same Europeans that nowadays everybody likes to trash on. I also really like how they aren't ideologically captured like a lot of other political movements are. There's a lot of diversity within the groypers. There's some who are monarchists, some who are constitutionalists, some who are Republican, some who are MAGA, some who are anti-Republican or anti-MAGA. And their movement really shows that you can have a sort of communitarian glue that helps the community stick together without resorting to tribalism. But some of the more negative aspects of groyperism, I would say, which by the way, before we get into them, full disclosure, there is some Jewish heritage in me. My mother's side of the family is comprised of a significant number of Jewish people. And you'll see why that might make me biased in my criticism in a second. I can't really tell if a lot of the Jew-hating stuff within the groyper movement is ironic or not. A worrying number of groypers themselves genuinely just would like to see the complete expulsion of Jewish people from the United States. However, I'm not going to claim that that's most or half of them because I just don't know. The reason why this is more so a criticism is less because of bigotry, because I genuinely couldn't care less about that, and more so because of the irony wrapped around it. Nick Fuentes himself has done a pretty good job recently of disposing in that irony in the sense that he's explicitly said he doesn't want to deport all Jewish people. He doesn't hate Jewish people as an ethnicity, so on and so forth. But for a very long time, he didn't do that, and he did wrap a crazy amount of things in irony. And he also denies the official number of the Jewish Holocaust victims. Now, the problem I have with that is less so that he has the view and more so that I've never really seen him debate or defend it. He mainly just alludes to things, which if he was on YouTube, I get it. You don't want to be censored or banned. Fair enough. I do the same stuff. It's rather that he won't contend with it directly now that he is off YouTube and he's banned from all these platforms and on Rumble. I've never really seen a serious debate about the Holocaust that Nick Fuentes has done. Now, if I'm wrong about that and he has gone into depth about all of these things, please do let me know and I will apologize for that statement. But from what I've seen, it really does seem like there just isn't a lot of backing to that position and it's mainly just based off of vibes. And this is sort of related to my next critique, which is just there is a lot of bio-essentialism in the movement, which is just greatly unappealing to me because I'm an Orthodox inquirer, and so I'm just instinctively very against things that say you are born a certain way and therefore are going to produce a certain outcome regardless of whatever actions you take as an individual free agent. So I'm like heavy against Calvinism and things like this that ascribe to predestination and that certain people are going to go to hell no matter what they do in life because God ordained it or whatever. But when I look at the groyper movement, it seems like they do have that attitude a lot in regards to several racial minority groups, not just Jews. Now, if it was just Jews, I'd be less worried about it because it's kind of a trend right now and trends die. But it seems to be the case that they feel this way about Indians, black people, so on and so forth. Now, I know for a fact that Nick Fuentes doesn't feel this way. He's a heavy critic of black on black and black on white crime, which is fine with me. I am too. And so Nick's views on race are not especially problematic to me. I don't even really see them as immoral most of the time, but it's just more so what a lot of the groypers think. Now, on this separate topic, it does seem to be a large amount of groypers. I'm not saying it's all of them, but a very significant amount seem to have this more bio-essentialist view of race. That the group of people you belong to is more or less indicative of the actions that you will commit in the future. And those are my two biggest critiques for the groypers. I don't think they really have too much wrong with them in the sense that they're hypocritical or something like this. I could certainly get it more into the weeds about government systems and things like this, but groypers have differing views about those. So for now, I'm just going to switch over to my thoughts on libertarians. One thing that I really like about libertarians is how much emphasis they put on the anti-woke sentiment. They're unapologetically anti-abortion, at least a lot more so recently because of the fact that it violates the NAP principle, otherwise known as the non-aggression principle. What I really like about this principle is that it really emphasizes human dignity and property rights. What's also good about this principle is that it also applies to the border. And so you see a lot of libertarians getting a lot more hawkish on immigration more recently and stepping up to support ICE, which is always great to see. They would argue something like one of the duties of the government is to protect their people specifically because they're rather isolationist. They would also say that the nation is sort of like property in the sense that it belongs exclusively to the natives living there. And so, yeah, they don't want a bunch of illegal immigrants to unethically enter and hog up resources from other people, as it is a form of aggression that they believe we have the right to defend ourselves from as Americans. Another thing I really like about libertarians is their emphasis on just how bad and evil socialism and communism really is. They can go really in depth and know firsthand the consequences of something like a Soviet Union rising, and so they take the rise of a AOC or Bernie Sanders type populist left figure very seriously. And it's mainly because of their super pro laissez-faire capitalism, ultra free market view they have. And so the fact that they are so conscious and aware of how corrupt a lot of wealth redistribution programs are has a ton of utility in it, and that should not go underappreciated in the slightest. However, that relates to my first critique of libertarianism, which is the economics. Now, although I agree that capitalism is the best system that we have in terms of economics, it certainly is not the perfect system, and I don't believe that caging that system and using the government to step in and alter the markets every now and then is inherently anti-capitalism in the same way that socialism is. It might be less pro-capitalist than laissez-faire capitalism, but it certainly is not socialism. Now, where I would specifically like to see government intervention in the market where libertarians would not is in the areas where it hurts the working class people trying to start their own private businesses. One thing that libertarians know is that private businesses need to thrive, and so I appreciate a lot of their red tape removal when it comes to that. However, they seriously overlook how much of a role large corporations play in stopping competition from being fostered. When monopolies form, like Google and Amazon, and they start to take ownership of a bunch of different services, it really hurts other people. For example, let's say you have Google, and Google pays off all the desktop companies, all the laptop companies, all the phone companies to have their search engine as the default one all of the time, no matter what. This directly hurts somebody. Let's say a small business owner wants to start up his own search engine company. Now people are being defaulted to Google, and they're putting in less effort in terms of thinking, what search engine am I going to use? Another thing I would like to see implemented economically that libertarians would absolutely hate are some nuanced adjustments to the welfare state. Unlike libertarians, I don't want to entirely get rid of it. I think it needs to be shrunken, and I also think that it needs to be conditional. I believe in order to reap the benefits of the welfare state, you should either have a disability or you should be actively seeking employment or have a job. And then once you reach a certain amount of money from said job, which I think the threshold should be a lot higher, maybe 150,000, that's when you should no longer have access to the welfare state. What this does is it greatly empowers middle-class Americans while not allowing poor people to mooch off of the tax dollars of them. And it sort of incentivizes poor people not to be jobless and lazy anymore. Now, as for what those base benefits should be of the welfare state, we can debate about that, but there definitely should not be no welfare state, because some people benefit massively from the welfare state and it's the boost they need to really get their leg up in the world. Also because there are a bunch of horror stories where people's insurance claims are getting denied when they are in dire need of assistance by their own private healthcare company and things like this. And then of course some people need it because they'll die without it, right? But I would say maybe universal single-payer healthcare, access to food and water, and maybe like the bare minimum amount of shelter. Now, this is a libertarian's worst nightmare, and so that is essentially my critique. My critique is that they would essentially reject in its entirety, and actually they would call it evil, everything that I'm proposing right now. So now, where does that leave me? there are things that I acknowledge that are good and bad on the groyper side of things and on the libertarian side of things when it comes to the right-wing ethos in the current political landscape for Gen Z. But to be honest with you, all that researching these positions have really affirmed for me is that my original conclusions going into this were right, and my convictions are now more solid than they were before making this video. So let me explain a little about my political philosophy. I believe in communitarianism. It means I'm a nationalist, and I believe that the native population of a country comes before all else, and that the government has an obligation to ensure the quality of the lives of the citizens within said nation are generally prosperous and safe. I'd generally be opposed to mass immigration and illegal immigration, and I'd also want some immigration limits enforced via quotas and things like this. I'm very opposed to H-1Bs and things like that. I'm also in favor of more patriotic and traditionalized propaganda, propagating things like the nuclear family, Christianity as the fullness of the truth, and other things in that realm. There's also a lot of human dignity that needs to be taken into account for this view, and so I'd be strongly opposed to things like abortion, most forms of euthanasia, and the death penalty. Now, the government system that is most effective at getting this done, that's still up for debate in my eyes, and I'm sort of open to being swayed by either side when it comes to that. I think a limited monarch that just takes charge of national sovereignty and interstate disputes while leaving the states themselves to resolve all the socioeconomic policies within their own jurisdiction sounds the most appealing to me at the moment, and like it's the fastest way to get all of this done and ease division in the country as well, which obviously makes it easier to propagate things like nationalism and patriotism. But yeah, I'm open to a bunch of different forms of democracy, constitutional republic, things like this. Right now, I'm very skeptical of dictators and fascists. However, I'm unsure if that's just the American in me acting on instinct, or if it's something I should rationally be against in the way that it's inherently contradictory to my worldview. But yeah, just thought for this last section of the video, I'd be completely transparent and just give you my thoughts on the right-wing ethos and what we ought to follow. Now, of course, my views are very niche. Most people are either still going to be groypers or libertarians, but I thought it would be an interesting little video if I just shared my thoughts as like the middleman in all this. I'm sort of like the guy that the rest of the right-wingers would look at as like a fence-sitting bitch with the fence post all the way up my ass. But yeah, if you guys did like my input, or it made you think in any way, or if this entertained you, please do give me a like and subscribe. Anyways, Jesus loves you all, and have a great day.